mamas, what's up? I'm so glad to be joined today by Gemma Stone, who is a registered psychologist. She is a Harvard-trained neuroscientist, and she helps people build emotional intelligence and resilience. And she and I have been friends also for many, many years, and she's one of the mamas that I jam with on a regular basis, and we discuss all the ways we are perfectly imperfect while we attempt to raise children who can navigate their way around the world. So Gemma, I'm super glad to have you here today. Tell us about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the introduction too, and the many years of friendship and morning walks when we jam on all the ways that we are messing up, but still raising pretty cool kids. So yeah, I'm a registered psychologist. I work in private practice. I started actually working with children, so really little kids, working like 3, 4, or 5 years old. I worked my way through the lifespan. I worked with adolescents that were really high risk for a while. And now I primarily work with adults one-on-one in my private practice. And then I also run group events and live retreats all over the world.
Nice. And tell us about your kids and your relationship to parenting. How old are they? And what's your like gist as a mama?
So my youngest one, he's just turned 9 and my oldest is 11. My gist as a mama is pretty much, how do I just kind of stay out of the way? I like to think about, like, one of the lessons that my kids have taught me is that I should pretty much be a houseplant, and I should treat them like houseplants. Like, I water them, I give them some soil to grow in, I make sure they get some sunlight, and like, I pretty much leave them alone. And then for myself as a parent, I try to be a houseplant too. Like, I hang out and I'm present and available, but I try not to interfere too much with the little humans that they're becoming.
Nice. I love that. So we often joke, one of our running jokes is like, just keeping them alive and watered and fed. You know, if you could do that, you're basically winning at the mama game in many, many ways.
Yeah.
So tell me, before we get too deep into anything, I'd love to know what's one thing you learned from your mom.
Yeah, so my mom was a single parent and she worked in a different town. So the one thing that I learned from her, she was very busy providing for us, and we lived in the country. The one thing that she provided that I, at the time, was not sure if I loved, but now looking back, I think it was just so foundational in terms of who I became as a human, was benign neglect. So there's 2 different kinds of neglect. There's a neglect that's actually damaging, and that can cause kind of interruptions in the bond, that can cause trauma. But then there's the benign kind of neglect, which is like, go and play in the forest and I'll like come home before it gets dark. Or like, here, go figure out how to build a fence and like, let me know when you're done. So my mom really taught me that kind of idea around just like kind of letting our kids figure life out. And again, not getting in the way too much. Like that whole like houseplant parenting philosophy is something she definitely taught me.
That's awesome. I would say my mom was pretty similar in a lot of ways, that we were like, I think there's a term for it now called free range. Like, we were pretty free range kids. We were allowed to kind of go where we wanted to go, be where we wanted to be. We lived in the country. So, you know, we were often like down by the river by ourselves or out in the forest, or not very often navigating the subways, which I know that, you know, kids that grew up in New York, that was their own jungle that they lived in, but we were pretty much allowed to kind of like, you know, have some free range. And it definitely gave me a lot of independence as an adult. And I hope my children have the same. So tell me, what's one thing you'd like our mamas to know about your topic and raising resilient children?
Yeah, raising resilient children. It's so complex right now because like you said, there's the different environments that our kids grow up in. So, you know, we grew up in the country. You mentioned the New York kind of free range parenting on the subway. Like, the environment that we grow up in is a really big deal, obviously. And right now, the culture that we're living in it can be a little bit challenging in terms of being an imperfect parent, because there's all these concepts that are kind of floating about like kind of how to be the best parent, and like the Instagram, everything looks perfect and the lunches are amazing and they're like dressed and there's no stains on their clothes. Like, it can create the sense of the competition or comparison, and we can end up feeling not good enough. So I think the primary message that I want to leave mamas with is this: like, we can be perfectly imperfect in our parenting. And in fact, like, that's good. We need to be imperfect. We need to be just a good enough parent. And what that actually means in terms of like, what does it mean to be a good enough parent? It's only 30%. Like, if we can kind of get it right-ish 30% of the time, if we can attune to our kids, like about 30% of the time, we're a good enough parent. We're creating enough safety for attachment, which is really foundational for mental and emotional health. And then we're making lots of space for mistakes and screw ups. And it's actually those mistakes and those screw ups, those moments of imperfection, where we're giving our kids the opportunity to develop resilience and emotional intelligence.
Okay, so I hear that, and I think it's something that I still, even though I wholeheartedly believe in, and I agree with you on, there's still this piece of resistance in me that I'm like, holy cow, that means I might do some damage to my kids. So what would you say to someone who feels like they're maybe have some resistance that 30% good enough is good enough?
Right. Well, there's some pretty good science that backs up that stat. But what that actually also means is not that we can be really emotionally damaging the other 70% of the time. It just means that there's opportunities for mistakes. And then within those opportunities for mistakes, we're going to screw up and our kids are going to screw up. And the most important part there is repair. So what is it that we do when we've made a mistake? Like, let's say that we've lost our temper or we missed our kids' cue and they're feeling kind of like really emotionally disturbed by that. What do we do with that? And the most important thing that we can do in those moments is circle back and repair. The second thing that's really important there in terms of the 30% is we just want to be an accurate mirror for our kids. So what that means is it's our job to reflect back accurately what our kids are experiencing. When we're an inaccurate mirror, there's 3 different types of inaccurate mirrors that can cause some problems. So those are over mirroring. And that's when we're like, you're perfect, you're amazing, you can never do anything wrong, everybody else is an idiot. Like, that's not such a good mirror, because then the child feels a sense of like pressure to be perfect and to live up to this impossible expectation. So over mirroring is not so great. Under mirroring, that's when we're super distracted. So our kids are talking to us and we're just not present and we're like, yeah, what? Like, and we're just kind of like looking at our phones, or we're not really engaged or aware of what they're sharing. So we want to try to make sure that we're not under mirroring too much. And then the third one is narcissistic mirroring. So when we present this narcissistic mirror, this is the one that's like, it's all about me. So my kid comes home and let's say shares a piece of art with me. And then I'd say something like, oh, that art is for me. Well, if you did this art for me, I prefer the sky to be blue. And when I was 5 years old, I did art like this and it was a little bit better and I got into an art gallery, but like, good job. That's more of a narcissistic mirror. We want to make sure we don't do that. So those are the basics. And if you're getting 30%, you're giving them an accurate mirror and you're repairing when you mess up, they're going to be really strong, emotionally intelligent, attuned kids that can have great relationships and also navigate the hard things that happen in life.
Yeah, totally. What's an example of like a really good accurate mirror with your kiddo?
So let's take the picture thing, for example. So little son comes home and I can see that he's really excited about his picture, let's say, because his eyes are like sparkling and he's like smiling and he's like jumping up and down. So what I would do is I would mirror that back to him and I'd say like, wow, you are so excited about this piece of art that you made at school. Look, I can see your eyes are shining. You got this big smile. You're hopping up and down. All those things are telling me like you're super excited. Show me your picture. Then he would show me the picture and I would say like, tell me more about it. So I'm just really being curious about his experience. I'm not projecting my judgments onto the experience. And then he's going to say, well, there's a green unicorn over here and the green unicorn is chasing the purple bird. And that I would just mirror that back. I'm like, oh, wow, you used your imagination and you like chose all these interesting colors and you're just reflecting back all the content that they're sharing. You're just trying to kind of be as accurate as possible without projecting a lot of story. And this is really important because one of the ways that we can be conscious parents as well as imperfect parents is we can be aware of something that we call shark music. So shark music is that like, da-na, Donna, like that feeling of like dread or worry or stress that we get when our kids are maybe going through an experience that we went through that was challenging. So let's say that I'm going to take this example. We're just going to keep playing with this picture. So let's say that he comes home and for whatever reason, on his art, I see a big red X. So for me, if I grew up and I had some like judgments around my art and creativity, and I had some kind of like trauma and wounding around that, I might see that big red X and like freak out and be like, who would draw a big red X on? Like, who's judging your art? And I would get all like defensive and stressed out because I have the shark music that's like, my kid is going through this terrible thing that I went through. When really, who knows if that's the truth? Like maybe he put the red X on it, or maybe a friend put the red X on it, or maybe they were like playing tic-tac-toe and a red X, like rogue red X got on his paper. Who knows? But that's the other piece too, is just being really aware of like, what are our own issues and how can we not project those onto our kids?
I love that. And I think that, so I'm pretty familiar with this way of parenting and being around my kids. But I've never heard the shark music before. That's an awesome way to say it. Cause I know that feeling too, when I think like, oh man, they're about to go through something that was emotionally challenging for me. And I have to always tell myself like, well, maybe it won't be for them. Like, I don't know what's going on for them, and what's not emotionally, like what wasn't emotionally challenging for me, maybe what's emotionally challenging for them. It's not just because it was my experience doesn't make it theirs.
Right.
You said something a minute ago as well about repairing and making sure that we repair well with them. Can you dive a little deeper into that? And what does that actually mean? Like, give an example.
For sure. So let's play with the picture thing. So let's say he showed me the picture, and instead of me accurately mirroring, I freaked out about the red X, and I got all in my story about what the red X meant. And I could slowly start to see him deflating and be like, whoa, this is way more about like mom and her issues around the red X than it is about me being excited about my art. And so I would pick that up. I would just notice like, oh, he came in excited. Now he's deflated. Like I missed something there. So I can be imperfect in that moment. Like if I did that, I would have been an imperfect mirror. But the point is to catch it and to notice like, oh yeah, I just sort of made that about me. And to repair that, I would circle back and I'd be like, hey, you came in the door. You were so excited to see me. You couldn't wait to show me your art. And then I got distracted by this red X and I started talking about the red X. And when I did that, I noticed like that shine went out of your eyes. The smile started to fall a little bit and you started to look over at the door. And I'm wondering if I missed something that was important there for you. And then he would be able to say like, yes or no or whatever. And then I would just apologize. I'd be like, you know what? I am so sorry that I missed that. I know you're super excited and I really want to see your art. Tell me more about it. And that's it. Repair is done. And then he's like, oh, good. Mom caught me. She attuned to me. She noticed my experience. She took responsibility for her experience. And now we can like repair and move on. And the most important thing about that is that the lesson that gets integrated from that place is I can mess up in life and I can be okay. So in that moment, I messed up in life and like we were okay. That's an important lesson to teach our kids. And the second is that we can be imperfect and the love is still there. So again, in that moment, I was imperfect and the love was still there. And it teaches him as well that when he's imperfect, because he will be, the love will still be there. And that is what creates that secure attachment, that sense of safety and security. And then we can go out into the world and feel like really confident knowing that we can rock whatever difficult, complicated, messy human things come our way.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I love too that when they see us interact with them that way, then they know that it's safe to interact that way with other people, whether it be with friendships and relationships in the future, or even with, like when they end up in trouble at school or have a confrontation at work. Like when they see us repair, it models for them how they can go and repair being perfectly imperfect in the future. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us, Gemma.
Thank you. This was a blast. I loved our conversation and thank you for putting this together because I think we need this message in the world that it's not only is it safe, but it's encouraged for us to be imperfect.
I love it. Thank you so much.